You. Okay. I'd like to call the February 27th meeting of the Governance Committee of the County of Oswego Industrial Development Agency to order. It is what time? 12:05. And I hand it over to you, Austin, to get things started.
Sure. So just in terms of attendance, there are 4 members of the governance committee, Chair Canale, Pat Carroll, Mel Chesborough, Gary Standard are all in attendance. So all 4 members of the governance committee are here. This is our first governance committee meeting of the year. So what we want to do, especially we have some new members on it, is sort of talk about the purpose of the committee, not go through it in detail, but just sort of the governance committee charter and what we're being tasked to do, and then looking at some action items before our next meeting, and then just sort of a timetable of what we're trying to accomplish over the next several months. So I'm actually I'll kind of start from the end there and talk about the timetable. So what we are looking to do is have the governance committee make recommendations to the full board for adoption at our next annual meeting of the IDA, which is going to be in August of this year. So we're about 6 months out on that. But as part of that, we're going to have really 3 main things that we're going to be looking at is a review of the bylaws, review of the policies, or at least the ones that need to be updated or should be looked at. Some of those are by state statute that they have to have certain language in them, and then other ones are just sort of our best practices and policies and how we do things. And then also reviewing of the mission statement. And the mission statement is important in particular because as we know, right now the IDA is undergoing a housing study, and that housing study may lead to the IDA becoming more involved in projects to add quality housing around the county. But to better be able to do that, we may need to add language specific to our mission statement about housing or other activities that we are involved in supporting. So that way we don't get ourselves ever in future trouble with the comptroller's office or ADO. So that's sort of a best practice identified by the ADO is if you want to get involved in some of these things, if you want to get involved in some of these things, you need to have it in your mission statement. I think, Nick, you were at one of these meetings a year or 2 ago, and that was brought up at that point there. So it's a good time for us to sort of review those things. So one thing everyone should have in front of them, the governance committee charter. This was originally adopted by the IDA back in 2008, and it's been sort of updated as needed. But really the purpose, I'm just going to kind of go over right now, the purpose of the governance committee is 1, to keep the board informed of current best practices in corporate governance, to review corporate governance trends for their applicability to the County of Oswego Industrial Development Agency, to update the County of Oswego Industrial Development Agency's corporate governance principles and governance practices, and advising those responsible for appointing directors to the board on the skills, qualities, and professional or educational experiences necessary to be effective board members. So, as I said before, I'm not going to go through all of this here. It's more just sort of lay the groundwork for the next several months of what we'll be doing. I think that probably one of the first things that we will be tackling, and probably at our next meeting in particular, is the mission statement itself, understanding some of the things that what we are involved in and in directions we may be going. And so what I have back here, I do. Okay, I'm gonna sort of some homework for our next meeting. I'm gonna take those and hand those around. This is the mission statement of the IDA currently that's getting passed around. And so it talks broadly about economic development, I'm gonna wait till get them around here. I'll give you one for Kevin as well. Oh, they're stuck. Is there something else on there? Oh, that's another thing that, yeah, we don't need to go over that one. Let me grab that. I'm just gonna have it on. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I do think it's good for us to sort of talk about this right now. So right now, the mission is to establish and implement sound economic development strategies in order to enhance the economic vitality of Oswego County's businesses, industries, communities, and citizens, leading to an overall better quality of life. And key to that is creation and retention of jobs, diversification, strengthening of the county's economic base, and developing the local economy in a planned, organized, and environmentally compatible manner. So some of those words are sort of very specific: job creation, diversification, but other ones are a little more generic in terms of catch-alls: quality of life, development in a planned, organized, environmentally compatible manner. In particular, because of housing and things like that, I believe that we are going to want to incorporate housing in particular, potential infrastructure in particular, into this language. I think that is, if we're going to be investing in or enhancing in any way with IDA programs, those areas, then they should be in the mission so that we never have to worry about running afoul of ABL or other things. If we're investing public dollars into those areas, that should be part of our mission. And I would say it's probably indirectly in part of our mission, talking about quality of life and other things, but it should be more directly announced in that.
Well, the meeting that I was at was here a couple of months ago. The part of the direction of the meeting was to make it clear to IDA leaders that you can invest in infrastructure and housing projects, but you need to do it right, and you need to do, and you can, because the housing is an attraction. Having appropriate housing in the area can help attract businesses too. So it's not just a quality of life thing. It's an enhancement of the economic environment.
Yeah, I think there was, you have to tie it to a legitimate public purpose, right? So, because you could say, well, housing, gee, who's that going to benefit? Just, a bunch of developers, right? But no, it's an incidental benefit direct to them, but incidental to the larger benefit of attracting, quality workforce, and so it's a public benefit, right?
To enhance our business.
Yeah, so it's these things that, I, maybe one of the things that I can do as well for our next meeting is, we can take a look at some of the other, peer industrial development agencies around the state and what they have adopted as their mission statement, to see what sort of other best practices are. Not saying we need to, copy that, but I think it could give us a good idea of what others have done to incorporate, and so we're not reinventing the wheel here. And I can say that there are multiple IDAs that have already done this. This is also recommendation from the IDA's bond council at Barclay Damon, that also work with several other IDAs, and it's a best practice to look at doing this. So I think that this to me, this may actually get recommended and adopted by the IDA before our annual meeting. The other items are necessarily to be done at the annual meeting, but this to me is something that doing this could help lead to some of our looking at our bylaws and other things. If we're adding in a specific language about some of these things, and that could also then influence some of our other things. One thing in particular this is not related to the mission or the bylaws, but a policy is we've adopted a solar deviation policy. You guys are aware of that process, and I think we might have done some of that right before you guys came into the board. So when you create a deviation policy, you're creating a policy to say, hey, we're treating this type of project differently than what we normally look at in our uniform tax exempt policy, or it doesn't necessarily address it the way you would want to. So, our uniform tax exempt policy is a 10-year for non-manufacturing, and it's a 20-year for manufacturing. Well, there's a lot of other things that can kind of go on. So for solar, we said, well, that doesn't really address that the way that other solar projects have been addressed around the state. So we created a solar deviation policy in particular and said that policy will pay X amount per megawatt, and it's going to be in place for this long, and it's going to have this sort of an increase, and it's going to require a decommissioning bond and all these other things. So it's all very specific in writings. Anyone who comes and looks at Oswego County to do that type of project knows what they're going to be into. I think that we should also look at doing something similar for housing, for having a housing deviation policy. If developers are coming to Oswego County and they want to build market rate housing, this is what our program looks like. This is how long it could be. This is what, we're asking of you. If you're looking to do senior housing, this is what that looks like. This is, and sort of have a thing like that. There's a couple ways other counties or other IDAs have incorporated that into the uniform tax exempt policy. And I think that's something we could look at, or the other option is this deviation policy, which you then, you're not opening up your entire uniform tax exempt policy. You're just creating a specific policy for housing in particular to look at. So that could be something that I wouldn't necessarily say this governance committee in particular is going to be doing that on your own. That could be a recommendation from this, is that looking at our governance and these things, this is something we should also be looking at, and then that would be developed in part by the entire board. But that's why I mean, like you do something like you change your mission, then that's going to lead changes to other policies and bylaws and other things. So I all that to say that I believe is where we should start and then go from there.
How do you feel as opposed to the two different options there?
So I think,
Exception or-
the closest example, I think, is Onondaga County. They adopted a housing UTEP, but I believe it's a deviation from their current policy. I don't
Yeah.
recall. So the process is the IDA board can deviate from its policy and like we did with the solar policy, to reopen and redo a uniform tax exempt policy is actually the county legislature's role. So, there's pros and cons with that too, right? You get 25 people in a room, and it's like.
Well, all the taxing authorities then have.
And then also all the taxing authorities get notification, have a chance to participate. So it's kind of a big thing to do. As opposed to like, again, with the solar deviation, we just adopted a resolution, we published it, off we go.
Didn't change anything related to the existing uniform tax exempt policy.
I mean, I think, I don't.
I would go that way, you don't wanna open up, that's a bag of worms.
I tend to agree, absolutely, but I don't know that there's many people, even, maybe I'm a little naive, but I'm putting it to you, Mel. If legislators knew that there was a way to attract housing developers to the county for a small benefit, we're not talking, forever benefits or they're exempt forever. I mean, Onondaga County is I don't have it, but it's minimal, but it just gets them over the hump. It gets them kind of.
But I don't know if we get into trouble if we are giving incentives to market rate and not low.
No, I think you've got to give it to the whole.
The
There's
whole
different,
thing.
as Austin mentioned.
You gotta give different things to
there's
different.
senior,
Yeah,
there's
I know there's
unexpected
just a
as far as
lot of
what-
anti-low housing, that comes out, it's gonna go, forget it.
Well-
We don't wanna help anybody to come in here to do low housing.
So.
I just know that from.
Yeah, I think that in looking specifically at what Onondaga County IDA did, they created really 3 different sub-programs under their housing. One was related to market rate, one was related to senior, and then one was related to affordable. And the one that they developed for market rate was a very accelerated pilot. It was a very short pilot. So it was honestly, it was to help on the sales tax exemption side, and it was also to provide a short-term pilot while that facility is filling up. On the senior side, it was a longer term pilot. I don't remember the exact off the top of my head right now. It might have been 12 years, something like that. But it was a more aggressive pilot to help encourage that because it was seen as a significant need. And then they also had one for affordable, which, you know, there's, I think unfortunately with housing, you know, some projects that I wouldn't call them bad projects, but projects that have some elements to them that turn out not great for the community. All projects then get lumped into that thing. So if there's a project that is sort of the one that you know, everyone points to, then everything else by default is that project or is thought of that way. I mean, there's several projects that the IDA has been involved in that are involved in affordable housing that are great projects in the community. And honestly, though, there's a project that we're not involved in, but all the projects get kind of thrown into that. We're not even in that project. So
Well, doesn't the affordable get a lot of benefits already?
it gets, so yes,
It already has a lot of incentives.
There's
for-
low income-
Where there isn't for
there's
the market rate.
correct.
So
Correct.
I see a need to give an
Sure.
incentive for the market rate. The low income is that every which way but loose.
Mhm.
Somebody's willing to give it money.
Yeah.
In there.
Yeah, I think that there's it's a good point. I think that there's significant programs available at the federal and state level
Mhm.
through low-income housing tax credits, through housing, the New York State Office of Housing Community Renewal, you know, that provide incentives for housing. But one of the things I would say that is a challenge is that especially for affordable housing, it's an issue of quality housing. You know, I guess it would depend on how you look at a situation. If you're saying, are you adding more affordable housing overall? Or are you replacing the most substandard housing with better quality housing? You know, so if you're looking at it from a perspective of, we're not looking to add more units overall, we're just looking to take the quality that's there and improve it, that could be something I think communities would go for.
But how can you tell that that's gonna happen? though?
Yeah,
You're
that's
not-
a slippery
You're not gonna
slope.
build it
Yeah.
down, or are you saying that you're
Sure.
gonna take people off of
Yeah,
Van Buren Street,
Well,
put
and
them into a better?
it's one of those, how
place,
do you as an
And then
idea
what happens
enforce
to the
that?
house on Van Buren Street?
Exactly.
It's not something we could,
Slippery slope.
it's not something we could enforce. It would have to be something done in collaboration or
Yeah.
partnership with communities that, you know, it's not something we could do on our own. But I think that there's gonna be a need for all types of housing across the spectrum. And then we just have to determine, how do we play a part in helping to influence and incentivize the types of projects we want to see in Oswego County.
Not across the board, right? So each pocket could be different.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's exactly how Onondaga County did it. You know, you can say, hey, we want more of this, so we're actually going to, we're gonna, you know, influence this with a better incentive and things like that than we are for other things.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's something I think that, like I said, we're not, this committee is not gonna be responsible for coming up with that policy. But I think having the recommendation that we need to have a policy is absolutely, you know, something to do. So I guess,
I also think you mentioned it once, but you didn't go into it further, is infrastructure.
mhm.
I think that needs to be addressed in our mission, because without that, you're not gonna get the housing.
Right, and I think that the IDA, you know, in the future could continue to play a part in helping to make infrastructure happen, because as we've seen, you know, a big bottleneck for us in terms of industrial development and other development is the access to infrastructure. We could invest in property, we can do this, but if the infrastructure isn't there.
But we did already help with Phoenix.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We really
Mhm.
invested in that, and now that's going ahead, so.
Yeah.
And we were able to do that and to justify it because we were trying to expand the industrial park
Right.
of Schuylkill.
It was a direct
And so
connection.
it's a direct connection for the IDA itself
Mhm.
to need, couldn't put another toilet in Phoenix,
No.
and we wanna put 192 acres of development in.
Yeah.
There's gotta be some give and take.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So that's why we were able to justify the amount of the
contribution
that
that we had for
particular
that,
one.
right?
Okay,
We contributed on a smaller level to sewer extensions near the airport,
right,
okay? And the county put in a little bit more in that situation because it wasn't a direct benefit to us, but the county does have land there
yeah.
that we can market.
Well, and you've also got the new, Socris that's going
Mhm.
through the whole line from Constantia.
The rail
down to-
trail, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that's definitely something, it would be an investment in all of this housing and everything.
I mean, and that's a great point you brought up. That is one that's being sort of spearheaded by the county because it's
Mhm.
utilizing the county rail trail as sort of the single right of way, I guess,
Yeah.
to put in a line that's 20 plus miles long from, you know, pretty much from just outside the city of Fulton to, you know, out to Constantia. You know, because that's sort of an intramunicipal and it is a countywide project, that could be something that, you know, I think that the IDA here should, you know, to what level, I don't know yet, but should be involved in helping to facilitate moving that forward, because that is a very innovative and I would say cost-effective model of providing sewer versus every community having to build their own plant, have their own operator and all these things. You know, it's not a model that has a lot of ROI, I guess, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, we're, the next lunch meeting next week, I think, yeah, we're, passing a resolution for us to be lead agent and to send the seeker in. So, and to start the grant process.
Yeah.
Because without the grants, obviously, this is gonna be a huge
And
thing.
Mel, you already know this, but anything that the IDA can do to help support or, you know, push that forward, because I think that is just a very unique and different way of looking at doing infrastructure than we ever have. And it's something that the county would actually get into investing in infrastructure where they haven't.
And
So-
DEC is a Twitter about this because of Constantia, none of the sewage is going in the lake. So they're just like, oh my God, this is a fantastic thing that you're doing. So if we've got the junkyard dogs involved, and that's what DEC is, the ones with the teeth.
Yeah.
If we've got them all backing us, I think we're gonna get some grants, and I think it could very well happen. It'll be
Yeah.
exciting, go right from Valley and everything.
Yeah, go through Bonnie, go through Scruple, Hastings, West Monroe, Constantia. Yep, okay. It is 12:30. I think we do have some food here, so I guess one of the things I just wanted to hit as an action item of this is reviewing the mission, determining how we could include some of these areas. I think infrastructure and housing in particular, you know, if there's anything else that should be looked at as part of that, sort of before our next meeting and then potentially having a crafted mission for our next meeting. Another action item, and this, Kevin, is something I think you're already doing on sort of an annual basis, but just with the policies we currently have, if there are any that for New York State statute purpose need to be amended. There's other ones that are just, you know, sort of like our best practices. So like I have one here, it's called our pull it up here. The project approval policy. That's not something that's necessarily a state, you know, statute, but that based on us doing our best process for that thing. So there's the ones that we're gonna need to change because we have to, because of state rules, regulations, laws. And then there's the ones that we just want to be able to do because it makes sense to update these based on where we are at and doing best practice. So is that something you could review,
Yep.
at least on the state side? What we need to-
Yeah, I mean, there's probably just shy of a dozen mandatory policies that the state requires every authority municipality to adopt. So we've got all those, they do request or suggest that they be updated annually, and we look at it, and then it's also mentioned, a lot of the other ones are best practices policies for us internally.
And then also maybe just a cursory review of the bylaws to see if there's anything that needs to, we did just revise the bylaws in June of 2023. They're more or less up to date, but if there is anything that's changed that, you know, it'd be good to include, so.
How often do you do the update of bylaws?
So.
Is it like, I noticed it was 2 years.
Yeah, so I mean, we're on an annual basis, you're supposed to review them, but it doesn't mean you have to change them. If they're okay, then you know, don't fix what isn't broken, but you know, it's something that needs to be reviewed. And so going forward, as part of this formalized process, you know, having the governance committee review on an annual basis, I think that one, because it's a new committee with significant new membership on it, we're kind of going through and starting from the ground up on some of these. I think it won't be that going forward on an annual basis, but there's just a lot of reasons that it makes sense to look at these things now. I don't anticipate we're gonna be changing our mission on an annual basis or things like that.
Absolutely. What's the game plan for changing, for adopting the new mission statement? Are you asking the four of us to each individually come up with what we think language should be?
I
or
think
do-
what we probably
how
would
we wanna go
do
with that?
coming out of this is have an email as a group. And then sort of just kind of say, listen, these are things we need to have. Let's talk about it, have comments within that, come with a working draft of what that could be for our next meeting. And then see if we can come to some sort of an agreement of what should be recommended to the board for adoption.
And as far as recommending creation of a deviation policy for housing to the full board, that's something we would come out of our next meeting after we adopt a new.
Yeah,
We're not gonna adopt a new mission statement at this committee, we're gonna write it and recommend it.
recommend it to be adopted by the full
Right.
board, correct. And I would say with that other one, I would want to. The result, well, we should have the results of the housing study by the end of March. We had a couple things delayed it a bit because we wanted to do some additional community and business surveys and things like that pushed it out a little bit. I'd like to have the results of that, because I think that will help influence significantly any sort of change to that policy. I wouldn't want to do that without knowing what those
Absolutely.
recommendations are. So I would just say that ideally, yes, that would be at the next, but I think we need to have that and have a chance to sort of disseminate that information, understand it first.
I guess the question is, how soon do you plan on having do we need to have the next meeting of this committee?
Uh,
Wait until we have
I would
that
say
report.
April, probably.
So we'll wait until we get that report.
Yeah, I don't wanna have too many of these. I mean, I'm thinking, well, this is our first, we have sort of a midpoint one and then we have a final one. So if we do, knowing that we need to do, August is sort of the deadline,
Do April and June or something?
April and June and yeah, something like that. Or July, maybe you do it in July.
So maybe an hour before the April meeting, IDA meeting, we'll do this.
That, if that works for you guys, yeah.
Yeah.
And if we need to bring in some good food every time, I'm not opposed to
I'm
that.
not opposed to that at all.
So you'll start an email thread with this
Yeah.
group and
Mhm.
bounce ideas off each other.
Yep.
for the Mission statement.
That would exactly how I'd like to do that, and like I said, I think I wanted to get you the bylaws and the governance committee charter. I did not want to print another 20 policies, so you guys walked out with a stack that large, so those things exist out on the shared drive that you guys have access to in the portal. I think if Kevin is identifying any in particular that will require some amendment or change, those will have printed copies of. And I'm also looking at some of the ones that are more of the best practice side, and just say, hey, like, we haven't updated this thing in a while, we haven't done anything, we should just at least take a look at it. If we're good with it, we're good with it, but if it's something that should have a change, we have the time right now to do that. So,
Anything else? Anybody, questions, concerns?
so, do we have the April meeting or the date for that, or is that gonna actually come out of today's meeting?
I think we have it.
So what we'll just do is just an hour before, that'll be that, and then.
We got it for the 24th.
Yeah, we have it the 24th.
April
Yep,
24th, so
1 o'clock.
if it's a 1 o'clock, we'll just do this again at noon.
Okay.
So that'll be our next meeting, and then we'll determine the July one later down the road, but April 24th will be the next meeting of the governance committee. I don't have any other business to bring for you guys.
Okay. That said, we need a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Gary,
Second.
second.